first one is directly related to eSIM. The second one is only indirectly related to eSIM. Thank you. So actually, sorry about this. So actually, Neil has helped me because I'm going to skip probably a big part of the first elements I wanted to talk about eSIM, which is the drivers of eSIM adoption. I will just focus on a few things that you might not have mentioned, but very few ones actually. Then I will talk about the initiative that we've been working on, which is interoperability as a service. And then I will explain how we are onboarding both mobile network operators, virtual operators, and OEMs into that initiative. So, about the drivers of the eSIM, the first one, so I will focus just on very few elements here. But you see there are three drivers to eSIM adoption. The first one is to have devices available. So Neil has been presenting in very probably more detail than I will do. What are the available devices, what is coming along, both from the smartphone perspective, and we are focusing quite a lot on smartphones ourselves as well, and on other types of consumer devices. We've done our own, so we're working a lot with counterpoint research to understand how the market is evolving. We have also conducted our own study because as an industrial company that is manufacturing SIM cards, eSIMs, and also producing eSIM services, we obviously need to understand how the market is evolving, at which pace, where, and how it affects our core business, right? So we've done a study actually with Bain & Co. Last year, which was also to try to predict the way the implementation of this eSIM would take place, both from a hardware perspective and from a service perspective as well. So first driver, having the devices. Second is having mobile network operators and virtual operators doing the job of launching those eSIM services and educating the market, right? And there, I would say, so we have a number of, I would say most of the major MNOs have launched eSIM services over the past 5 to 7 years probably now. What is interesting, since we are a recent comer into the eSIM ecosystem, we've been focusing quite a lot on emerging countries or countries where at least the penetration of eSIM compliant devices is still limited. And there we have tried to put in place a number of business models to make sure that those MNOs in those countries were also able to launch eSIM services. And why so? Because obviously the higher segment of population that is generating the higher ARPU for them are starting to have some eSIM compliant devices. So even though the penetration is low, the people that are acquiring those devices obviously are high potential customers. So we've been launching eSIM services with a number of MNOs and MVNOs, obviously in Europe and in the US, but also in Latin America, especially where we have quite a strong presence. Also in Asia, also in Africa as well. And this is part of the work that we've been doing. Obviously, down the road, if we're looking at 2025 or 2026, especially if, as Neil was mentioning, Apple actually comes at some stage on the market with some eSIM on the devices, all the MVNOs, or virtually all the MNOs and MVNOs, will have services available by 2025 or even before that. So the thing is that we expect also them to take a full benefit of the eSIM capabilities, which might not be necessarily the case as of today, because they've been migrating from physical SIM and physical SIM processes for both provisioning and activation of the subscriptions to the eSIM. So they have tried to limit the impacts on their infrastructure as a first step of implementation. We are expecting that they will go more and more digital. They will also adapt more and more both their provisioning and their activation processes to eSIM, and they will get better benefits of the eSIM as well in the future. Right? And then customer awareness. You see that comes from the two first drivers. On customer awareness, I have to say that if we are believing, which we do on GSMA data on customer awareness, the people that already have today eSIM compliant devices, they are quite aware of this capability and what it allows them to do. And this, whether the MNOs are actually doing the education work or not, depending on the country, right? So we have good expectation that this should not be a barrier into the adoption of eSIM in the future, whereby we're going to have more devices applying to different segments of market, especially in the smartphone area, as Neil was explaining. Another thing which I forgot to mention is that from a service perspective, from the eSIM service perspective, delivering subscription management services to customer, whether you have an eSIM, an embedded SIM, or an integrated SIM, should actually be quite transparent for the entity, the MNO or the mvno delivering the service, right? So there will be many impacts on the bill of material, the way you are integrating the technology, right? The level of the security that is involved, not so much on the eSIM services side. So we're expecting that the migration from, or the transition to integrated SIM, which is starting to happen, but it goes step by step basically, will not have an impact on the services that are being delivered to customers. Okay? The expected benefits, I think Neil as well has done part of my job here by presenting what are the expected benefits. I will just insist on one actually, which is this one, which again is not necessarily, not all the MNOs and MVNOs have taken all have not tackled all the opportunities that are actually brought by the fact that you don't have to procure physical devices, which are physical SIMs, distribute those SIMs, manage inventory, distribute those SIMs to end users, but also to point of sales, and to manage the obsolescence, all the indirect costs that are related to physical SIM cards, right? The traditional SIM card. So whenever you are migrating to eSIM, you are somehow not having all those indirect and direct costs to manage. And this should have some positive impacts also on the way the MNOs and the MVNOs are deploying eSIM services. Right? I will come back to that in a minute. And by the way, eSIM is a SIM card with more memory and more computation capabilities. So there is an opportunity there as well to go further into both the segmentation of customers by implementing more applications on that physical eSIM, right? Through the eSIM profile that is being defined by each MNO and MVNO. To do a more, what I call hyper-personalization, so basically to have the ability to have several profiles and to have customers migrating from one profile to another one quite seamlessly, offering new services to that specific customer. It's also an interactive channel that you can manage in some specific cases, right? Even though it's quite basic, it's also fit for purpose in some cases. And basically, you can also manage the life cycle of those subscriptions in a much more agile way than you would do whenever those subscriptions were attached to a physical SIM card. So basically, what the message here is that you see there's no reason for MNOs or MVNOs to wait for launching eSIM services. I think technology is, especially in the consumer segment, is mature enough so that there is some consistency in the way you're implementing it today and the way you will further develop it down the road. There is also the necessity to have a customer experience that is going to be more and more digital. Again, the starting points for many MNOs have been quite basic, replacing a physical SIM by a physical or digital QR code. There are many other ways to activate a subscription onto eSIM. So when we talk about interoperability as a service, what kind of problem are we trying to address? Well, especially we are trying to make the life easier for the OEM device makers, right? And why so? Because eSIM is somehow a new technology for them. They were not involved into physical SIM cards whatsoever in the past, so very limited involvement from their side. And now that they have this solid component into the device, they need to make sure that they are able with that component to actually receive the MNO subscription, the eSIM profiles that are being developed by the MNOs, right? And this is where it becomes to be a challenge for them, especially at the time when they are validating prototypes. And whenever a device that has not been tested, comes to the market, and for whatever reason there is a difficulty for a customer to download an MNO subscription, obviously the first thing that the customer will do is call the MNO call center usually, not the OEM call center. And then that is generating obviously some costs for the operator, whether it's a physical or virtual operator. And then it's also creating some customer dissatisfaction, right? Being recently into this eSIM ecosystem, we've been confronted to a number of difficulties that some OEMs were having when launching to specific markets, because the profile that had been developed by the MNO was simply too big to be downloaded into the eSIM in some specific cases, or there was some inconsistency between the eSIM profile and the physical eSIM. Right? So that's why there are a number of players that are trying to address the interoperability issue. GSMA being one of them. So GSMA has implemented a number of test sets in the past. They have conducted another one recently, actually earlier this year, but still it's limited to a limited number of players, and we would like this to be potentially wider. Right? TCA, which is the Trusted Connected Alliance, is supposed to work on further details on the interoperability tests of the profiles themselves. Right? The profile is actually being specified by the TCA. But the process is taking some time, so as of today there is no real tool in place from the TCA to work on the interoperability of those eSIM profiles with the physical eSIMs of the OEMs. And so that's the reason why there are a number of other initiatives that are popping up. Ours is not the only one, probably the best one, but not the only one. And again, with the objective to do a real field-proven interoperability. Okay. So what is it about? It's about. It's actually quite simple. We have set up a dedicated subscription management platform, so called SMDP Plus, into one of our data centers, and we are offering the access to this platform both to MNOs, and we're actually actively recruiting MNOs so that they can provide us with the eSIM profiles that we are provisioning onto that platform, and we are opening it up to OEMs, again free of charge, for them to test their prototypes in advance of launching the devices onto the market. Right? So for this, we are using test certificates. We are not integrating the credentials to access to the network, so it's purely about downloading the eSIM profile that has been defined with the MNO to the OEM eSIM. Right? And we believe that with these tests, we are addressing probably about 80% of the problems that are potentially happening onto the field, or at least from our experience. So for the MNOs and for the OEMs, this is a way to manage the first level of interoperability. It doesn't address all the homologation that an MNO would like to conduct for an OEM device, right? Because typically, as I said, there is no attachment to the network, so all the tests that are related to the behavior of the device on the network are not being addressed here. But still, this is quite useful, we believe, for launching an OEM device onto a market. So, as I said, we launched this actually in March last year with two partners, one of them, which are two labs, right? Quite known into the eSIM ecosystem. Well, UL is known widely because they are a lab for about everything, every technical thing you would like to handle. But so it's UL and FIM, actually, the two labs that we've been launching this initiative with. We have been recruiting MNOs over time, right? And it's really a one-by-one approach to all those MNOs. So we have about more than 30 that have onboarded today. So some of them, of the logos that you have here, have several MNOs, actual operations behind this, right? With different profiles. And we have started to have, so we started actually with two, not OEMs, but two chipset and eSIM suppliers. So ST Microelectronics, which happens to be our partner into the eSIM ecosystem for standalone eSIM implementations. And NXP, which is actually a competitor of ours. We have also an activity of selling physical eSIM to OEMs. So NXP, into that regard, is our competitor, but still NXP has found some good interest in making those kinds of tests, even though they are conducting some tests on their own prior to launching the new generation of eSIMs onto the market. And we start to have some OEMs that have joined for quite some time already now. Some of them being very specific, very small. Again, all of them being into the consumer ecosystem, right? Some of them like Honor, like Ava, or like Pegatron being more significant, right? And to go HLD as well, which is a Nokia brand, right? So this is a picture as it stands today. Again, 15 months after launch of this initiative. So you see, it's very easy for both MNOs and OEMs to join this initiative. Again, it's a non-commercial initiative, so there's no cost apart from the own testing cost of especially for the OEMs that are involved into this. For the MNOs more specifically, the idea is that we are, the starting point is that they are providing the specifications to us that we can develop their profile, the AC profile, that we are provisioning into the platform. We are expecting them also to be used as referral, so that whenever a new device maker is approaching them with a new device, they can go through that interoperability as a service platforms to do the first level of interoperability test prior to a deeper homologation of the device. And then once this is being done for MNOs and MVNOs, there's no further work expected from their side, so there's no technical support to be provided. What we are doing ourselves is that we are delivering a report every end of the quarter to each of the participating MNO and MVNO, so that they know what has been the activity related to their own specific profile. And that's a way for them to understand if there has been any technical problem in downloading their profile on a specific device, and then to be able by themselves to get into contact with the relevant OEM so that they can investigate into more details what is the issue there. So very simple initiative, ongoing since 15 months. The new one I want to discuss about is actually a new one. It's not directly related to eSIM, it's more addressing the IoT segment, and it's about multi-eSIM. And there we talk very quickly as well on the challenges of roaming, because Neil as well has discussed about it before, so that's good. Trying to see to show that multi-MC is still a proper way of going to the market, especially for MVNOs today. And we see a continuous interest of MVNOs in implementing multi-MC schemes, which hasn't slowed down in any way in the past. It's more oppositely, right? It's increasing somehow. There's some momentum about it. I'll present very quickly about what is our multi-MC solution and who are the partners we have into that space. And then I will introduce what is this MIA, multi-MC alliance initiative that we're launching. Okay, so the roaming challenges, again, Neil has talked about it previously. The main difficulty in IoT is that you need to have a kind of local provisioning whenever you are delivering a global product to the industry. Right? So, and that implies that potentially you have to implement some sophisticated connectivity schemes, because you have a certain level of quality of service that you're expecting to provide to the IoT customer. And you need to be able to switch from a subscription or from an IMSI to another one, or from a connectivity to another one, depending on the location. And again, this has to be managed in a very dynamic and flexible way. So to that respect, the roaming ecosystem, the way it stands today, is not necessarily very well adapted to this for a number of reasons. Obviously, those reasons are very well known by the MVNOs that are potentially here in that room, so I will not spend too much time on it. So, but today, the roaming per se is not necessarily, it's expensive, and it's not necessarily well adapted to what you want to do when you are launching an IoT project for customers. One of the difficulties we have is that you might not be able to predict the level of volumes of connected devices that will go into a destination country on a case-by-case basis for a specific IoT project, especially at the time when you are launching that project. So this is why the whole sales model of roaming is not necessarily very well adapted to what the the mvnos want to do whenever launching IoT projects. At least that's the return of experience we have experienced. Right? So that's why managing multiple IMSI is still a very good way, even though it's a traditional way of launching IoT projects for MVNOs on the market. Because it's fit for purpose, it's a good substitute to potentially to some of the roaming schemes that are in place. It's not a new technology, it's been there for more than 25 years probably. It has evolved quite a lot over time. It has evolved in terms of reliability as well. Initially, in the early days of LTE, there were some problems whenever you were crossing border between, for a connected device between very neighborhood countries, especially in Europe. So this is over now. I think it's very reliable as a technology today. It works both in standalone, so as an applet into a traditional SIM or an eSIM. It can also work in connected and dynamic mode. So whenever you can download a subscription whenever you are an IMSI, whenever you are reaching a country which was not necessarily planned at the early days of launching this IoT project. And it's compatible with eSIM. So I would say that most of our MVNO customers that have launched or are launching multi-IMSI schemes today are launching them